Hey, this is Off the Cuff, and I'm Steve from TorahFamily.org. Yeshua made a critical statement in Matthew chapter 10 that often gets overlooked as basic knowledge. However, what if there's more to it than many believe? Let's look at the statement. Matthew chapter 10, verses 32 and 33. Whoever acknowledges me before men, I will also acknowledge him before my Father in heaven. But whoever disowns me before men, I will disown him before my Father in heaven. It's interesting to note the two differences that are given here: to acknowledge or disown. It's one or the other. This would imply to acknowledge is to own, and to disown is to reject or deny. When we understand that Yeshua is the Word made flesh, we also see that rejecting the eternal Word is just like we're rejecting Him. One may say they accept Yeshua, but if they reject the Word, they're rejecting Him. This begs the question, what was established as the Word of God in the eyes of John when he wrote John chapter 1, verse 14? To answer that, we should see what Yeshua himself defined the Word of God as. Consider the following verses in the book of Mark, where Yeshua is talking to the Pharisees. Mark chapter 7. You have let go of the commands of God, and are holding on to the traditions of men. And he said to them, you have a fine way of setting aside the commands of God in order to observe your own traditions. First, contrary to what many believe, we can see here that the Pharisees weren't following the law, the commands of Yahweh. They were following the traditions passed down to them. For more on that, please see our teaching, Don't Be a Judaizer. Now, let's look at verses 10 through 12 of this same text. We'll see how Yeshua illustrates they are letting go of the commands of Yahweh. First, he establishes what Moses says in verse 10. For Moses said, honor your father and your mother, and anyone who curses his father or mother must be put to death. But then he points out what they do, which shows they oppose what Moses gave. Verse 11. But you say that if a man says to his father or mother, whatever help you might otherwise have received from me is Corban, that is, a gift devoted to God, then you no longer let him do anything for his father or mother. He then makes the conclusion that they therefore nullify the word of God through their actions. Verse 13. Thus, you nullify the word of God by your tradition that you have handed down. And you do many things like that. Yeshua's conclusion is declaring the law written through Moses as the Word of God. He was the Word of God made flesh. Thus, he walked the Word of God, the law, perfectly. Therefore, when you acknowledge Yeshua, you acknowledge the Word of God, the law. And if you disown Yeshua, well, you're disowning the Word of God, the law. They're one and the same. Likewise, if you reject the law, you reject Yeshua. Now, you may say you aren't, but again, they're one and the same. There's just no way around it. This is why we see what Yeshua says in Matthew chapter 7 to those he rejects. Matthew chapter 7, starting in verse 21. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only he who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and in your name drive out demons, and perform many miracles? Then I will tell them plainly, I never knew you. Away from me, you evildoers. Now, please understand, the word evildoers here in the English is actually a phrase in the Greek. The phrase means workers the lawlessness, or workers of lawlessness. We see here that they called him Lord, which would imply they confessed him to some degree. However, it appears they rejected the eternal word, his law. So by rejecting the law given through Moses, the word, they ultimately were rejecting him. For many, this immediately brings up the question, are you saying one has to follow the law to be saved? First, the answer to that is no. The law has never saved anyone. Never has, never will. The law wasn't made to save anyone. It was given to show us how to walk in his ways. Remember, Yahweh delivered them out of Egypt first, and then he gave them his Torah to walk in. As I've said before, he didn't give them the Torah while they were slaves in Egypt and say, here, obey this, and I'll save you if you do it. No, he first delivered them, then he gave them his Torah so they can walk in his blessings. Faith is the root, and obedience is the fruit. For more on this, please see our teachings, The Greatest, the Least, and the Defiant, and Faith Alone. Not knowing about and not understanding the Torah is one thing. However, rejecting it is altogether different. And since we see Yeshua rejecting these people in Matthew chapter 7, it seems these people were those who rejected the Torah. That means they were rejecting him, the living word. Remember, Yeshua lived the law, and we're instructed to pursue his example. 1 John 2:6, whoever claims to live in him must walk as Jesus did. How did Yeshua walk? He pursued the Torah. So, if that's what he did, that's what we should do. If we choose not to walk as Yeshua did in pursuing the Torah, that means we are rejecting the Torah. Thus, we are not acknowledging him and his life. And if we're not acknowledging him, that means we are denying him through our actions. Yes, we may call him Lord with our words, but our actions are denying him. This explains what Yeshua said in Matthew chapter 10. Again, whoever acknowledges me, the Word of God, before men, I will also acknowledge him before my Father in heaven. But whoever disowns me, the Word of God, before men, I will disown him before my Father in heaven. Thus, the workers of lawlessness who Yeshua rejected in Matthew chapter 7. So the question is, are you acknowledging or denying the Word of God? Please think about this. This is serious. The verses in Matthew 7 are not something we should take lightly. These are people who believe with all their heart they were in right standing with Yeshua, only to find out they're not. Why? Because they rejected the law given through Moses, the Torah, the Word of God. They called Yeshua Lord, yes, but he called them workers of lawlessness. Please remember, the Antichrist is also called the man of lawlessness. I realize this may sound harsh in a sense to some, but please know I'm not saying any of this lightly. And please remember, it was Yeshua who said the workers of lawlessness would be rejected, not me. If this concept is new to you, or maybe you feel you've heard it all before, either way, please consider digging into it deeper by visiting our Faith Foundations page at torahfamily.org. There you'll find teachings that address the many questions that we have all had at one time or another on this topic. Well, that's all I have. Think about it. Pray about it. But more than anything, be a doer of the word and not a hearer only. Until next time, Shalom.